Hey guys, I'm Bach, and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And on this week's video, in case you hadn't guessed from the introduction, we're taking a look at arguably one of the most instantly recognisable guitar intros ever recorded, and that is of course Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. So the first question to answer is, how did he get that tone? Indeed, it is the title of the video. Of course, the first thing worth mentioning is that he didn't. She did. Wendy Melvoin, Prince's guitarist in Prince and the Revolution from 1983 onwards. Funnily enough, this show, which actually spawned the recording of Purple Rain, it's worth mentioning it is indeed a live recording. Funnily enough, the footage of this show is actually available on YouTube, and you can see the full kind of 10-minute version in all its glory. It's amazing to see how much stuff actually did make the cut on the final recording, and save for a couple of string overdubs here and there, there's not really much stuff that was changed later on, so it's testament to how incredible this recording was straight off the bat. As I said, this was Wendy's first show. She was 19 at the time, and it was her first ever show with Prince and the Revolution. And to top it all off, this was the first time that Purple Rain had ever been played live. Now, before we delve into the gear that she may or may not, as it turns out, have actually used on this track, first thing definitely worth mentioning is going to be the chords that were played. As I said, the footage of this gig is available on YouTube, and you can plain as day see what she's playing. So despite all the confusion that surrounds this song and the myriad of different ways people actually play these chords, it is pretty clear on that recording. So I've kind of put it out in chord diagram version, I guess. So should you fancy giving it a go, hopefully this will be of some use to you. Now, in regard to gear used on this track, which I guess is probably why we're all here, it's typically Prince, to be honest, in that anyone who actually worked with Prince seems to have had the Men in Black effect in force at some point, and their memories have become increasingly hazy over the years in regard to gear used, or times and dates and all that kind of stuff. So actually getting to the bottom of what gear was used on this recording is a little bit of a task, to be honest. Undoubtedly, on Wendy's guitar part, I should say, there is a chorus-y type effect, and I say chorus-y type because I'm not convinced it is actually a chorus. Given the time this was recorded in 1983, there were relatively limited chorus pedals actually available on the market, or I should say actual kind of rack mount units as well, which obviously were very popular at the time. And having done a fair bit of digging and listening to the track in depth, it is my belief that it is actually a Boss Dimension D. Now, this was a rack mount unit that was actually released in 1979. Boss actually followed this up then in 1985 with a pedal release of the same unit, at least it was very similar, called Dimension C. But obviously this recording predates the pedal, so it's not too much of a giant leap to assume that at least maybe live or in the studio later on, the Dimension D effect was added. As I said, to my ears at least, it sounds very similar. I haven't got one of these original units, however, Boss have very kindly sent me the Boss Wazelcraft version of the DC2 pedal that they released last year, which actually has the Dimension D mode on it. So if you flick the main switch over to the right, I've engaged modes 3 and 4, which again to my ear gets me somewhat close. So the main guitar part in isolation with that effect on it sounds a little bit like this. Now, I say main guitar part because listening to the actual track itself, it's thrown me a little bit in that it does sound as though there are two guitar parts going on. However, what I think I am hearing is not only the amp version, but also a DI'd version. So what I've done is, again, run that through the Dimension D, but not to give it any digital amp emulation, just to give it that sparkle and that clarity that I can kind of hear in the track, to be honest. With the initial guitar part, there is that typically analog-esque woolliness, I guess, surrounding the recording, but there is a sparkle and a clarity coming from somewhere. And listening to the recording with a good set of headphones, you can definitely hear two things going on. So it's worth mentioning it is the exact same guitar part that you've just heard. Didn't re-record this, I just DI'd it instead and didn't reamp it. It sounds a little bit like this. in regard to the guitar, this is the one area where there is a fair amount of information available online, and that's because it was fairly visible at the time. And that is, of course, Wendy's purple, heavily modified, worth adding, Rickenbacker 330. Heavy modifications being a switching of the pickups. She put in something infinitely higher output than the standard pickups. Obviously, I didn't want to do that to this guitar today because it isn't mine, first and foremost. So thank you very much to the guy that very kindly loaned me this guitar today. Also worth mentioning, she'd added a Gibson-style stop tail on it. Arguably that has an effect on the tone, but crucially she'd also blocked off the F-hole, so there wasn't any air moving inside the guitar, not really making it a solid body in effect, but definitely giving it some more sort of solid body sort of qualities, I guess. But in regards to really nailing the tone, I think something typically jangly and open and airy sounding as the Rickenbacker is really essential. So I guess the last thing really left to do is do an actual comparison between my own recorded version and the original. Now, the usual caveat supplied, this is obviously a digital emulation of a very analog recording way back from 1983, so nailing the sort of idiosyncrasies of the recording, I guess, is always going to be a little bit impossible, but I've got as close as I can. And again, the point of this video, not so much actually nailing the tone note for note, or the recording note for note, is to actually just give you an appreciation of the gear that was used, or maybe not used, and how it was recorded. So, without further ado, this is what they sound like back to back. And there you have it. Hopefully it got close enough for jazz. As ever, I've been Chris Buck. This has been Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell icon. And I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care, and I shall see you soon.